As darkness settled over the British Empire's greatest city during the autumn of 1888, London seemed to disappear beneath an endless ocean of smoke, rain, and suffocating yellow fog. Thick coal smoke rolled heavily from towering factory chimneys and drifted through the narrow streets like poisonous storm clouds, swallowing entire neighborhoods beneath darkness even long before midnight. Gas lamps flickered weakly through the haze, their tiny flames trembling against the cold, damp air, as though they too feared the city around them. Their faint yellow glow reflected across wet cobblestone roads that stretched endlessly through twisting alleyways lined with decaying brick buildings blackened by soot and age. Horse-drawn carts clattered loudly through puddles while exhausted workers hurried home beneath heavy coats, vanishing almost instantly into the fog. The distant whistles of steam trains echoed through the darkness from overcrowded railway stations, while down along the River Thames the industrial docks remained alive throughout the night with shouting laborers, creaking cranes, and ships arriving from every corner of the globe. Victorian London stood proudly as the center of the world. It was the capital of the most powerful empire humanity had ever known. Nearly 5 million people lived inside the enormous city, making it the largest urban center on Earth. Wealth flowed endlessly into London from every continent touched by British influence. Merchant ships unloaded exotic spices from India, silk from China, tea, machinery, tobacco, and goods from distant colonies. Massive banks controlled international trade and finance with ruthless efficiency. Factories thundered day and night beneath skies permanently stained gray by coal smoke. New roads, railways, and neighborhoods spread outward constantly as London consumed everything around it. To outsiders, the city represented civilization itself, a symbol of industrial progress, imperial power, and modern human achievement. But beneath that glittering image of greatness existed another London entirely. A hidden London, a darker London buried beneath poverty, overcrowding, violence, disease, and fear. And nowhere was that darkness more overwhelming than in Whitechapel. Located in London's East End, Whitechapel had become one of the poorest and most overcrowded districts in England. Thousands of immigrants from Ireland, Poland, Russia, and Eastern Europe crowded into filthy streets already overflowing with laborers, dock workers, criminals, alcoholics, and struggling families barely surviving from day to day. Entire families often shared a single tiny room with little ventilation and almost no sanitation. Open sewage flowed beside muddy roads. Rats crawled openly through alleyways, basements, and walls. The smell of coal smoke mixed with rotting garbage, cheap alcohol, damp wood, and human waste until the air itself felt poisonous. Disease spread rapidly through overcrowded lodging houses and shelters. Tuberculosis haunted entire streets. Cholera outbreaks killed dozens within days. Children wandered barefoot through puddles and filth while exhausted mothers searched desperately for food or work. Violence was constant. Street robberies occurred almost nightly. Gangs controlled dangerous alleyways after sunset. Police officers patrolling the East End were badly outnumbered and often powerless to stop the chaos surrounding them. For women living in Whitechapel, survival itself became a daily battle. Victorian society offered poor women very few opportunities. Factory work paid wages so low that many could barely afford bread. Domestic servants could lose employment instantly over the smallest disagreement or mistake. Widows, abandoned wives, and homeless women often had nowhere to go and nobody willing to help them. Many were eventually forced into prostitution simply to survive another night. Not for luxury, not for excitement, not for freedom, but for food, for shelter, for warmth, for the few pennies required to rent a bed in a common lodging house. Those lodging houses charged only 4 pence for a filthy shared bed inside overcrowded rooms filled with smoke, alcohol, and disease. Yet even that tiny amount was often impossible to earn. Women who failed to pay before evening curfew were locked outside without mercy, forced to wander freezing streets beneath rain and fog until morning. That was the brutal reality of Whitechapel during 1888. And somewhere within that endless darkness, someone was watching. A killer hidden beneath smoke and shadows. Someone patient. Someone calculating. Someone disturbingly calm. He hunted vulnerable women walking alone through the streets after midnight, searching desperately for money to survive another day. The world would eventually know him by a name that still echoes through history more than a century later. Jack the Ripper. The nightmare officially began during the early morning hours of August 31st, 1888. A carman named Charles crosswalked through Buck's Row before sunrise on his way to work. The streets were silent except for distant footsteps and the occasional sound of horses somewhere beyond the fog. Weak gas lamps cast dim yellow light across wet cobblestones slick with rainwater. Then Cross noticed a dark shape lying near a gateway. At first, he assumed it was another drunk woman sleeping in the street, a common sight in Whitechapel. But when another man approached and the two moved closer together, horror struck them instantly. The woman was dead. Her throat had been cut savagely, her abdomen mutilated with shocking brutality. Her name was Marion Nichols, known to friends as Polly. She was 43 years old and had spent years struggling with poverty, alcoholism, and homelessness. Like countless others trapped inside Whitechapel, she had walked the streets that night trying to earn enough money for a bed. Police quickly arrived at the scene. Even experienced officers appeared deeply shaken by the violence inflicted upon her body. Yet despite the brutality, investigators initially believed the murder might be isolated. Whitechapel already suffered frequent violence and street crime. Nobody yet understood the nightmare beginning to unfold. But only 8 days later, another body appeared. On September 8th, Annie Chapman was discovered in the backyard of an apartment building on Hanbury Street. Chapman, 47 years old, had once lived a stable life before poverty and alcoholism destroyed everything around her after her husband's death. Again, the violence horrified investigators. Again, the killer vanished without leaving clear evidence behind. Now fear spread rapidly through London. Police realized they might be hunting something almost unheard of in Victorian Britain: a serial killer. Newspapers immediately transformed the Whitechapel murders into national obsession. Victorian journalism thrived on sensationalism, and the murders dominated headlines daily. Front pages displayed dramatic illustrations of shadowy figures hiding beneath gas lamps while terrified women fled through fog-covered alleys. Crowds gathered anxiously around newspaper stands searching for updates. Rumors spread through every district of the city. Some believed the killer was a trained doctor because of the injuries inflicted on the victims. Others suspected butchers familiar with knives and anatomy. Immigrants became frequent targets of public suspicion and violence. Women across London became terrified of walking alone after dark. Vigilante patrol groups formed throughout Whitechapel armed with clubs, knives, and whistles. Angry mobs gathered outside police stations demanding immediate arrests while accusing Scotland Yard of complete incompetence. Then the letters began arriving. Hundreds were eventually sent to newspapers and police headquarters claiming responsibility for the murders. Most were likely hoaxes written by journalists or pranksters feeding on the growing panic. But one letter changed the entire case forever. The Dear Boss letter, received on September 27th, it mocked investigators with cold confidence while promising more murders to come. At the bottom appeared a signature written in red ink: Jack the Ripper. The name spread across Britain and the world within days. Suddenly, the unknown killer became something larger than human. A faceless monster, a living nightmare hidden inside Victorian London. The murders continued. Then came the most terrifying night of all. September 30th, 1888. The double event. Shortly after midnight, police discovered the body of Elizabeth Stride inside Dutfield's yard. Stride, a 44-year-old immigrant from Sweden, had endured years of hardship and tragedy before ending up in Whitechapel. Unlike previous murders, investigators believe the killer may have been interrupted before completing his horrifying ritual. Witnesses reported suspicious men nearby, but descriptions constantly contradicted one another. Police rushed desperately through Whitechapel searching for clues. Then, less than an hour later, another body was discovered. Catherine Eddowes, 46 years old, a mother, a woman who had experienced both stability and crushing poverty throughout her life. The violence inflicted upon Eddowes horrified even hardened detectives. Her body had been mutilated with terrifying precision. A kidney and other organs had been removed. Panic exploded across London. Newspapers declared that a monster stalked the streets. Scotland Yard faced enormous public pressure while fear consumed the East End completely. But detectives faced nearly impossible challenges. This was 1888. Modern forensic science barely existed. There were no fingerprints, no blood analysis, no DNA testing, no surveillance cameras. Crime scenes were contaminated immediately by crowds gathering around the bodies. Witnesses constantly contradicted each other. Whitechapel itself swallowed evidence beneath darkness, fog, smoke, and endless confusion. The killer seemed invisible, untouchable, like a ghost moving silently through the city. Then came the final canonical victim, Mary Jane Kelly. Only 25 years old, Kelly differed from the other victims because she rented her own small room inside Miller's Court. Friends described her as cheerful, attractive, and kind despite the misery surrounding her life. On the morning of November 9th, 1888, someone arrived to collect overdue rent. When they looked through the broken window into Kelly's room, they recoiled in horror. The scene inside was beyond anything investigators had yet encountered. The violence shocked even experienced officers. Some reportedly became physically ill upon entering the room. Photographs taken at the scene remain deeply disturbing even today. Public outrage exploded across Britain. Newspapers attacked Scotland Yard mercilessly. Citizens demanded arrests. Fear consumed Whitechapel entirely. And then, without warning, the killing stopped. Jack the Ripper vanished back into the darkness as mysteriously as he had appeared. No dramatic arrest ever occurred. No suspect was conclusively proven guilty. The killer simply disappeared into history. Over the following century, the mystery only deepened. Hundreds of suspects were proposed. Montague Druitt, a barrister whose death shortly after the murders raised suspicion. Walter Sickert, the artist linked to disturbing theories. George Chapman, later convicted of poisoning women. Doctors, sailors, butchers, immigrants, lunatics. Even members of the royal family became targets of elaborate conspiracy theories involving secret societies and political cover-ups. Modern DNA tests performed on old evidence produced controversial claims, yet experts remain deeply divided about their reliability. Historians still argue endlessly over witness statements, police reports, timelines, and possible motives. Who exactly was Jack the Ripper? Why did the murders stop so suddenly? Did the killer die? Was he imprisoned for another crime? Did he flee London forever? Or did he continue living an ordinary life while hiding one of history's darkest secrets? Nobody knows. And perhaps that uncertainty explains why the mystery continues haunting the world today. Jack the Ripper became one of history's first modern monsters. A figure born from genuine fear, media obsession, darkness, and urban paranoia. The Whitechapel murders transformed crime reporting forever. Newspapers discovered how fear and mystery could captivate entire nations. The case helped create the modern obsession with serial killers and unsolved crimes that still dominates popular culture today. Books continue appearing. Films continue retelling the story. Documentaries continue searching for answers. Internet forums debate every theory endlessly. Tourists still walk the streets of Whitechapel at night, searching for echoes of the mystery beneath modern streetlights. But behind the legend, there were real victims. Real women living through unimaginable hardship inside Victorian London. Mary and Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. 5 lives forever linked to one unidentified killer. And somewhere within the fog-covered streets of Whitechapel, the truth disappeared, perhaps forever. Jack the Ripper was never caught, never conclusively identified, never forgotten. And perhaps the most terrifying thought of all is that history's most infamous killer may remain unsolved forever.